Let me sit with you for a moment and tell you something plain and true. Long before anyone notices your talent, long before titles are handed out or names are called, something quieter is already at work inside you. It's not flashy, it doesn't raise its voice, but it is steady, and that something is character. Character is not what you show the world when the lights are bright. Character is what you practice when the room is quiet and no one is clapping. Now, people often think character is built in big moments, grand decisions, dramatic sacrifices, public acts of courage. But that's not where it starts. It starts much smaller. It starts in silence. It starts in the everyday choices you make when nobody's keeping score. It's how you treat what doesn't belong to you. It's how much effort you give when there's no reward waiting. It's whether you clean up a mess you didn't make but could easily walk past. Those moments don't look important. They don't feel heroic, but they are practice. And whatever you practice in silence is exactly what will show up when life puts you on the spot. You see, who you are when no one is watching is who you really are. Everything else is just performance. Life has a way of pulling the curtain back. One day, pressure comes, temptation comes, responsibility comes. And when it does, you won't rise to the level of your words or intentions. You'll fall to the level of your habits. That's why what you do in private matters so much. You are rehearsing for a moment you haven't seen yet. Some folks live like they're waiting to be observed before they act right, as if goodness only counts when someone is there to witness it. But doing the right thing isn't about being seen. It's about being shaped. Every quiet decision leaves a mark. Every time you choose honesty when lying would be easier, something inside you strengthens. Every time you give your best when cutting corners would go unnoticed, you reinforce a standard. And every time you listen to that small inner voice instead of silencing it, you teach yourself who's in charge. Character grows the same way muscles do, through repetition, not once, not when it's convenient, but again and again, especially when no one would blame you for choosing otherwise. There's a difference between being good and being consistent. Anyone can do right when it benefits them. Anyone can behave when the rules are loud and the consequences are clear. But consistency is built when there's nothing forcing your hand. And let me tell you something important. The hardest person you will ever have to live with is yourself. You can fool a crowd, you can impress a supervisor, you can convince people with polished words, but you cannot escape your own awareness. At the end of the day, you know what shortcuts you took. You know what truths you avoided. You know what standards you lowered when you thought it wouldn't matter. And that knowing settles in your spirit. If you betray yourself often enough, you lose trust in yourself. You start doubting your own word. You hesitate when decisions matter because deep down, you're not sure you'll stand firm. But when you honor yourself in the small, unseen moments, something powerful happens. You develop inner confidence. Not arrogance, not loudness, just a quiet certainty that says, I can be trusted. That kind of confidence cannot be given. It cannot be borrowed. It must be earned privately. The world doesn't need more people who act right only under supervision. It needs people who carry their values with them into empty rooms, late nights, and lonely crossroads. People whose integrity doesn't disappear when accountability does. Because sooner or later, life will put you somewhere alone with a choice. No instructions, no applause, no one to check your work, and in that moment, all the lectures you've heard won't save you. All the promises you've made out loud won't hold you steady. Only the habits you practiced in silence will guide your hands. Character is not built overnight. It's built on ordinary days when nothing special is happening. It's built when no one is looking and you decide that doing right still matters. And let me say this gently but firmly, what you allow yourself to do in private is what you are giving yourself permission to become. So guard your private actions, respect the unseen moments, treat them as sacred ground because they are shaping you, whether you realize it or not. When you learn to do the right thing when no one is watching, you are not just making a good choice. You are making yourself into someone strong enough to handle whatever life brings next. And that kind of strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need recognition. It simply stands. All right, listen close and take your time with this one. People love to talk about values like they're something you hang on a wall or write in a notebook. Big words, strong statements, promises spoken with confidence, but values don't live in speeches or slogans. They live in choices. And most of those choices are so small, so ordinary, that we're tempted to believe they don't count. But let me tell you the truth. The smallest choices are the loudest storytellers of who you really are. Life rarely asks you to prove your values in dramatic ways. It doesn't often come with a drum roll or a spotlight. Instead, it whispers, it nudges, it slips a decision into your hands that feels almost insignificant. And right there, right in that quiet moment, you show what you stand for. It's in whether you keep your word when breaking it would be easier. It's in how you speak when no one would stop you from being careless. It's in what you do with an extra minute, an extra resource, an extra opportunity. These are not headline moments. Nobody posts them. Nobody applauds them. But they reveal more about your heart than any big declaration ever could. You see, big values don't suddenly appear when the stakes are high. They are already formed by the time the moment arrives. They've been shaped by thousands of small decisions made long before anyone was watching closely. Some people say, it was just a little lie, just this once. It didn't really hurt anyone. But every time you say that, you are teaching yourself something. You are deciding what matters and what doesn't. You are setting a precedent inside your own spirit. And once a pattern is set, it doesn't ask for permission to grow. It just does. Small choices are like seeds. You may not see the results right away, but don't be fooled. They take root. And one day, you'll be standing in the middle of a life that grew from decisions you barely remember making. That's why it's dangerous to underestimate the ordinary. The ordinary is where your values either strengthen or slowly erode. How you treat people who can do nothing for you, how careful you are with things entrusted to you, how honest you remain when dishonesty would be convenient. These moments feel small, but they carry weight. They shape your reflexes. They decide what feels normal to you. And what feels normal eventually feels right, even when it's wrong. Now here's something folks don't always like to hear. You don't drift into integrity. You choose it over and over again, especially when the choice seems too small to matter. Because when the choice is small, there's no pressure to be your best self. That's when your true values come out to play. Anybody can do the right thing when the consequences are obvious. Anybody can behave when the cost of doing wrong is high. But values are revealed when the cost is low and the temptation is quiet. Those are the moments that answer the real question, what kind of person are you becoming? And becoming, that's the key word here. None of us wake up one morning fully formed. We are always in the process of becoming, and the direction you're moving in is determined not by your intentions, but by your daily decisions. You don't wake up one day with compromised values. You practice them into existence. You allow little exceptions. You ignore small warnings. You make peace with tiny shortcuts. And over time, those little choices form a big picture. On the other hand, when you choose honesty in small matters, courage in quiet moments, and kindness when it costs you nothing but effort, you are building something solid. You are teaching yourself that your values are not negotiable, that they don't change based on convenience. And that kind of inner consistency becomes your anchor when life starts pulling hard. Let me say this gently: what you excuse today, you empower tomorrow. If you excuse cutting corners when no one notices, don't be surprised when cutting corners feels natural later on. If you excuse silence when you should speak up, don't be surprised when your voice feels weak in moments that matter. Small choices train you, always, but here's the good news. And there is good news. Small choices work both ways. Every small act of integrity strengthens your backbone. Every time you do the right thing just because it's right, you reinforce your values. You build trust with yourself, and that trust becomes confidence, not the loud kind, but the steady kind that doesn't shake easily. You start to know who you are, and knowing who you are makes it much harder for the world to pull you apart. Values aren't proven when life is fair. They're revealed when life gives you wiggle room, when nobody's forcing your hand, when you could go either way and still sleep at night. That's when the smallest choice becomes a mirror. So don't wait for a big moment to live out your values. They're not waiting there. They're waiting in the small moments you're tempted to overlook. Pay attention to them, respect them, treat them like the building blocks they are. Because one day you'll look around at the life you're standing in, and it will be made almost entirely of the choices you thought didn't matter. And if you've been faithful in the small ones, you'll find that your values didn't just guide your actions, they shaped your character. That's how quiet decisions become a powerful legacy. Come a little closer now, because this part of the lesson is one people often misunderstand. Many think integrity is something you put on when the occasion demands it, like a special outfit you wear for important events. They believe it shows up only when the rules are written clearly, when expectations are announced, or when someone is there to check your work. But integrity doesn't work that way. Integrity isn't a performance. It's a habit, and like all habits, it's formed quietly, patiently, and over time. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly decide to be a person of integrity. You become one by repeating the same honest choices so often that they start to feel natural. That's when integrity stops being something you do and starts being something you are. Now, habits don't care about your intentions. They don't care what you meant to do or plan to do someday. Habits are built by what you actually practice. That's why what you repeat matters more than what you promise. If you practice cutting corners, your hands will reach for shortcuts without you even thinking about it. If you practice honesty, truth will come to you more easily, even when it costs you something. Whatever you practice in the dark becomes second nature in the light. And that's why integrity must never depend on an audience. Some people are excellent performers. They know how to look responsible, sound ethical, and appear dependable when someone is watching. But when supervision fades, so does their standard. That's not integrity. That's image management. Integrity doesn't ask who's watching. It asks what's right. And that question must be answered the same way every time, whether the room is full or empty. You see, habits are powerful because they remove the struggle from the moment of decision. When integrity is a habit, You don't have to debate with yourself every time temptation shows up. You've already decided who you are. The choice has been made long before the situation arrives. That's a kind of freedom people don't talk about enough. Integrity as a habit frees you from constant inner conflict. You're not exhausted from pretending. You're not stressed from keeping track of what version of yourself you showed to whom. You are simply consistent, and consistency is calming, but let me be honest with you. Building that kind of habit takes effort. At first, doing the right thing feels heavy. It feels inconvenient. It feels like swimming against the current while everyone else drifts. That's because you're training something new, and anything new feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. In the beginning, integrity requires discipline. You have to stop yourself. You have to slow down. You have to choose carefully when rushing would be easier. But over time, discipline turns into habit, and habit turns into character. What once felt hard begins to feel normal. This is why people who live with integrity aren't constantly announcing it. They don't need to. It's not a badge they wear. It's a rhythm they live by. They show up the same way, whether the moment is big or small, public or private. Now, here's something important. Integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about being committed to correcting yourself when you fall short, committed to telling the truth even after you've made a mistake, committed to realignment instead of excuses. Habits are shaped not just by what you do when you succeed, but by how you respond when you fail. Do you justify? Do you hide? Or do you take responsibility and choose better next time? That response becomes part of your habit too. When integrity is a habit, accountability doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like alignment. You're not afraid of being examined because you're not living a double life. Your private self and public self are not strangers to each other, and that unity, that wholeness, is rare and valuable. A life built on performance is exhausting. You're always adjusting, always editing, always worried about being exposed. But a life built on habit is steady. You know where you stand, you know what you believe, and that clarity gives you strength. Integrity as a habit also means you do the right thing even when it doesn't benefit you, even when it slows you down, even when no one thanks you, because your motivation isn't approval, it's alignment with your own values. And let me tell you, alignment is powerful. When your actions line up with your beliefs, your energy is no longer divided. You move through life with purpose instead of pretense. Over time, people may notice, or they may not. But that's not the point. The point is that you become someone you respect, someone you trust, someone who doesn't have to rehearse honesty because it lives in you already. So, if you want integrity in the big moments, start building it in the small ones. Practice it when it feels unnecessary. Repeat it when it feels unnoticed. Choose it until it becomes automatic. Because when integrity is a habit, you don't rise to the occasion. You respond from who you've trained yourself to be. And that, my dear, is how doing the right thing stops being an act and starts being a way of life. Now stay with me, because this lesson speaks in a quiet voice, and you have to be willing to listen. To hear it, there is a teacher that walks with you every single day. It never raises its voice. It never forces your hand. It never embarrasses you in front of others. And because it is so gentle, many people learn to ignore it. But that teacher is always present, always aware, always offering guidance. It is your conscience, the quiet guide that speaks when no one else is around. Most of the time, conscience doesn't shout. It nudges, it unsettles. It creates that small pause right before you act. That pause is where wisdom lives, and what you do in that pause determines how strong your inner guidance will become. You see, conscience is like a muscle. The more you listen to it, the stronger and clearer it gets. The more you ignore it, the weaker and quieter it becomes. It doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, worn down by excuses and justifications that seem harmless in the moment. People don't lose their moral direction suddenly. They lose it one ignored warning at a time. That first time your conscience speaks up, it's usually clear. You feel it in your chest, in your gut, in that uneasy sense that says, "This isn't right." But if you talk yourself out of listening, if you say, "It's not a big deal," or just this once, your conscience takes note, not to punish you, but to adjust. Next time, the warning comes softer. And if you ignore it again, softer still. Before long, the very thing that once disturbed you barely registers. Not because it became right, but because you trained yourself not to hear the signal. That's a dangerous place to be when the inner voice meant to guide you has been muted by repeated neglect. But let me be clear, conscience is patient. Even when it grows quiet, it doesn't leave. It waits, and when you choose to listen again, it strengthens. It responds to attention. That's the grace of it. Listening to your conscience when no one is watching is one of the purest forms of integrity. There's no reward attached, no recognition, just the satisfaction of knowing you honored what you knew to be right. And that satisfaction runs deep. Some people think conscience exists to make life harder, to restrict them, to take away enjoyment. But conscience isn't your enemy, it's your protector. It's the part of you that sees further than the moment you're standing in. It understands consequences long before they show up. When conscience speaks, it's not trying to rob you, it's trying to save you. Save you from regret, save you from self-betrayal, save you from becoming someone you don't recognize. The world will give you plenty of noise, advice, opinions, pressure, but conscience is different. It doesn't argue. It doesn't compete. It simply tells you the truth and leaves the choice in your hands. That's why it matters so much what you do when no one is watching. In those moments, the only voice you hear is your own. And that's when you decide whether you're going to be guided by what's right or by what's easy. Listening to conscience requires courage. Sometimes doing the wrong thing is faster, cheaper, and more convenient. Sometimes it benefits you in the short term. Conscience asks you to think beyond that, to consider the person you're becoming, not just the outcome you want. And growth always asks something of you. Here's the beautiful part. When you consistently listen to your conscience, it becomes a source of confidence. You begin to trust your inner compass. You're not as easily swayed by crowds or trends or pressure because you have a steady reference point inside you. You don't need constant validation. You don't need approval to know you're on the right path. That inner peace becomes your anchor. But when conscience is ignored, something else takes its place: rationalization. You start explaining away decisions instead of examining them. You become skilled at defending choices instead of questioning them. And once rationalization becomes your guide, you can convince yourself of almost anything. That's why paying attention early matters. Small moments of conscience are like early warnings on the road. Miss them, and the detour becomes harder to avoid. Let me say this gently. The voice inside you is shaped by how you treat it. If you listen with respect, it grows wiser. If you dismiss it, it grows weary. And the habits you form around conscience follow you everywhere. Into relationships, into work, into leadership, into moments where others depend on your judgment. A clear conscience is not loud, but it is powerful. It allows you to stand alone without feeling lonely. It allows you to say no without guilt and yes without fear. It allows you to sleep at night without replaying your choices in your mind. So when that quiet voice speaks, and it will pause, don't rush past it. Don't drown it out with noise or excuses. Sit with it for a moment. Let it finish its sentence. Because learning to do the right thing when no one is watching begins with learning to listen when no one else is speaking. And if you honor that voice in the small, hidden moments, it will guide you faithfully in the moments that matter most. That is wisdom you can carry anywhere. Now let me leave you with something that ties all of this together, something life itself teaches if you're paying attention. Trust doesn't begin in public, it begins in private, long before people place confidence in you, long before responsibility finds its way into your hands. Something quieter is already at work. You are either building trust or eroding it. When no one else is aware of what you're doing, public trust is never sudden. It looks sudden from the outside, but it's not. It's the visible result of invisible honesty practiced over time. People often ask how trust is earned, as if it comes from one impressive moment or a single right decision made under pressure. But trust doesn't grow that way. It grows slowly, like something rooted deep beneath the surface. And those roots are formed in private honesty, what you choose when no one is checking, correcting, or congratulating you. Every time you are honest when dishonesty would go unnoticed, you add another root. Every time you keep your word when breaking it would be easy, another root grows. Every time you take responsibility instead of shifting blame, the foundation strengthens. No one sees those moments. But they feel them later, because here's the truth. People may not know what you do in private, but they feel the consistency it creates. They sense when someone is steady. They recognize when words and actions line up without effort, and that alignment builds confidence in you, even when they can't explain why. That's how trust works. It's felt before it's named. You can't demand trust. You can't perform your way into it. You can't talk people into believing in you long term. Trust is given quietly, over time, to those whose private honesty has shaped a reliable public presence. And once trust is given, it carries weight. But let me also tell you, this trust is fragile. Not because people are weak, but because trust depends on truth. And truth doesn't bend without breaking something. When private dishonesty creeps in, public trust eventually feels the shift. It may take time, it may take distance, but it always shows up. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation. Sometimes as doubt. Sometimes as opportunities that stop coming. Not because people know what happened, but because something no longer feels solid. That's why private honesty matters so deeply. It protects your future self. It guards the reputation you haven't earned yet. It prepares you for responsibility you don't yet carry. People who are trusted rarely talk about it. They don't need to. Their lives speak for them. Their decisions don't change depending on who's in the room. Their values don't shrink under pressure, and that consistency creates safety for others, and safety is the foundation of trust. When people trust you, they listen to you, they rely on you, they place important things, decisions, resources, people into your care, but none of that happens if you haven't first learned to be honest, when the only witness was your own conscience. Let me be plain with you. How you handle small responsibilities determines whether you'll be given larger ones. Not because the world is watching every detail, but because integrity has a way of revealing itself. It shows up in how you speak, in how you respond under stress, in how you treat people who can't offer you anything in return. Those patterns are not accidental. They are the outward signs of inward discipline. Private honesty also gives you something just as important as public trust. It gives you self-trust. You begin to believe your own word. You begin to rely on your own judgment. And when you trust yourself, you don't move through life trying to prove anything. You move with quiet assurance. That kind of confidence doesn't rush. It doesn't brag. It doesn't need approval. It stands calmly because it knows where it came from. But when private honesty is missing, public trust becomes a performance. You're always adjusting, always protecting an image, always hoping no one looks too closely. That's an exhausting way to live. And sooner or later, something slips. That's why the safest life you can build is one where your private self and public self are the same person. No explaining, no covering, no fear of exposure, just truth practiced daily. Now, don't misunderstand me. This isn't about perfection. People trust those who are honest about their mistakes far more than those who pretend to be flawless. Private honesty includes owning where you fall short, correcting your course, and choosing better next time. That kind of honesty deepens trust instead of weakening it, because trust doesn't come from never failing. It comes from being truthful, accountable, and consistent. So when you're tempted to cut a corner because it doesn't really matter, remember this: you are not just making a decision for today. You are shaping how trustworthy you will be tomorrow. You are either training yourself to be dependable or rehearsing disappointment. And the beautiful thing is, every day gives you another chance to choose honesty, another chance to reinforce your integrity, another chance to quietly build a life others can rely on. You may never see all the ways your private honesty opens doors for you. You may never know how many opportunities came your way simply because someone trusted you, but that's how it works. The reward is often invisible, just like the work that earned it. So do the right thing when no one is watching. Tell the truth when it would be easier not to. Be faithful with what's small, because one day, when trust finds you, it won't feel accidental. It will feel earned, and that trust, once built on private honesty, becomes a legacy no spotlight could ever replace.